Good morning. It's just after 5 here in Calgary, and I want to talk a little bit and teach a little bit about foot placement. I'm getting a lot of questions lately about where and how far do we put our feet when we're in standing poses. So this is going to be a bit of a workshop-y kind of small session here today. So I wanted to actually take a look here initially at stand, the skeleton. Where your foot placement is in all of your position is ultimately what is optimal for you. And I know that is a very vague, well, it depends answer, but it really depends on how that leg bone moves in the hip socket for where this foot is placed, because the foot is the punctuation of your posture. The foot is at the end of this kinetic chain. So if this does not move very well for whatever reason, then that's going to have some influence on where that foot's placed. So to give an example, a number of years ago when I fell down my stairs and I sprained my coccyx and my pelvic floor went into major spasm, then I could take my legs wide quite far and I would also spasm in my pelvic floor. So I started very, very narrow as far as my pelvic floor didn't spasm. So I had the range of motion, but it just wasn't very functional, nor did it really serve my pelvic floor and my coccyx. So then I slowly, as things settled out and as function and as tissue settled out, as my nervous system settled down, as I started to heal and recover, then my leg was able to come out more in line with what my range of motion was saying that I could do, and I could do it more functionally. So that's just a bit of an example of kind of exploring. So we're going to explore that today and see where you land up. So I've got a little pelvis here handy. I've got a little breathing ball here, which I'm going to use for an example. And I had a ball which rolled away, but I have a ball here as well. So what I'd like to begin with is to start yourself in standing, okay? And I want you just to feel your feet on the floor, the center of your heel, the ball of your foot, and the base of your pinky toe. And then just get a sense of your knees and your thighs and your legs and your hip sockets and where your pelvis is, how your abdomen feels, what's going on up through your rib cage, through your limbs. And just sense into where your breath is at. Yeah? And then bring your legs wide for a moment. And now notice the same thing. Notice if when you took your legs wide, did your pelvis go into an anterior tilt? So when you took your legs wide, did you do this with your pelvis? Or from here, standing, were you able to step your legs straight out? So notice that if you did, notice that you had to bring, or you unconsciously moved your pelvis this way and then your legs came out. So the typical tendency is now to start tucking your tailbone to take your legs out. So how about not do that and instead just move your legs out as far as your pelvis just stays more or less where it was. And notice where that position is. Right? Now I can't see you, so obviously what I'm about to say next may be completely wrong. But a lot of times when I see people who take their legs wide and they anteriorly tilt their pelvis, what we're often seeing is an inability to actually do that range of motion. So back it up a little bit to the range where their pelvis is in a happier space, and then that's where they begin. Now feel the bottoms of your feet. And you can use that with your, did your knees hyperextend? Did your feet overpronate? You can play around with, did your back go in pain? Did you all of a sudden start holding your breath? And these things might just be things that were under your awareness, and all you need to do is think about them and go, oh yeah, look, I did that. So now I'm just going to move wide without that happening. Sometimes just bringing the awareness online is enough, but sometimes it's just this mechanical thing, right? And it's a coordination thing. It's just a brain to body thing. That's something that we just need to retrain. That's all. Not a biggie. Okay, so then we're here. Now let's rotate the leg bones out. Okay, so leg bones rotating out into the pelvis. There. So you'll notice that what I'm not saying is angle your feet out. I'm not making this a foot movement because in order to bring that foot in that position, it's actually got to arise from that leg bone. Now start to, this is articulating joint. Now move from your hips, your knees, and your ankles. Yeah? Okay, now feel the center of your heel, the ball of your foot and base of your pinky toe. And notice what goes on again now, right? So as you drop and as you lift, and notice if there's anything grindy or cranky, and then why not move in the range that is no cranky, no grinding range of motion. Or if you've got a SI or a thing, whatever, that's grinding and cranky all of the time, then move in a range that doesn't go up in terms of symptomology. Yeah. And then bring your hands to the back of your legs, press the legs backward into your hands, and now start to take yourself down. Notice what happens to your feet. And again, the position that I'm in and the distance of my legs, that's not important for you. It's the fact that I've moved my legs wide and I've rotated them. That's what I'm teaching. So then you get to play with the distance your legs are and the rotation of your leg bones, and just explore and be curious about what's going on in your system. Yeah? And then kind of refinding your own inner authority of like, all right, what's actually happening in through here? Yeah? Okay, good. And then bring yourself back and now feel where you're at. And we're going to come to the floor. We're going to use the ball. Now, we don't need to come to the floor. If you're having difficulty coming to the floor, you can take the ball into the outside of your hip here and roll the outside of your hip there. I'm going to take it down to the floor and come onto my hands like this. You can also come onto your forearms. Most people who watch this stuff, they are familiar with this. So it's not that I need to do a play-by-play of how to do it, but the idea is that we don't want to get sore in your wrist in an effort to get more aware of your hip. So if you need to come down onto your back, more like here or here, then please go for it, okay? You determine what you need for yourself. And just feel into it, like really, really feel into it. Sometimes we can kind of get caught up in, well, I should be doing this or I should be doing that. And the great thing is your body will keep giving you back signals about whether you're right or not. Yeah? Okay, and then if you've got it available, we're just going to move your leg, or I'm going to move my leg. You can follow if you'd like. I'm going to move my leg in a different orientation to just expose a bit of different area in my hip. So I'm going to take it up through here. So now that femur head's in a different position so I can get access to different areas of my hip. Now sometimes we can get annoyed with what our body might be saying back to us. And I've heard people tell me, if my body would just behave. And what I'm kind of on a mission to really teach is that the body is behaving. For every ambition and desire you have, it follows suit. It really has no choice. But the difference between your body and your mind is your mind will keep on going. And your body is not a renewable resource. Like, we've got to take care of it. And so a lot of the signals and the symptoms that it's providing you are indicators of just how things are going. It's a nice barometer. Okay, bring that ankle up. So it can be frustrating at times, particularly when your mind really wants to do something and your body's saying, I'm really tired. Or and if you've got a history and a strong skill set of pushing through and pushing aside symptoms, but the thing is they're going to come back louder. You can't ignore it. Well, you can, but it will come back louder. Or in another form. Okay, and then come there. All right, come on up. Let's come back to here. Okay, now, take your legs wide. And now notice if that did anything different with your leg bone and your hip. Okay, good. And then notice if that felt any different. And then notice if that felt any different. Okay. And if it did, then that really gives you a nice indication that there's a relationship between what's going on in your hip and what's going on with the placement of your feet, right? So that when your hips are feeling a little bit different, right? There's perhaps a little bit of release or something of that sort going on in there, an increase of an awareness, and your foot placement will change. That will change then where you are for, say, let's come into Warrior Two. Warrior Two. So you just determine, the thing is, I mean, I know we hear this all the time, but the distance of your legs doesn't mean anything. Okay, and let's go the other way. And ultimately depends on what your intent is for your practice and for your life and what you're utilizing your practice for. Okay, arms up. That really dictates it all, yeah? Good. Okay, good. And then come up. Good. And now come forward here, back into standing. Now I'm going to turn this way. I'm going to grab my chair. And I'm going to step forward into Paschimottanasana. So legs are forward. Now the tendency here is to lead with the chest and lead here. Okay, now I want you to think about rib and pelvis connection, and now start to move your pelvis on your legs. Now notice again what goes on with your legs. Maybe you're hyperextending the knee. So in that case, maybe you go less of a distance, or you take your stance a little more narrow. So it could look like that. It could look like that. Just kind of watch out for what's going on with your knee, because a lot of times what I see are people with hyperextended knees. Something has stopped between their pelvis and their leg, like their hip movement, and they just didn't notice it. Good, and then come on up. Okay, other side. And then from the hip, watch what goes on in the ribs. Watch that you don't lead with your chin, so pay attention to that one too. Good, and then think about right here. Pelvis leg, pelvis leg, pelvis leg, pelvis leg, pelvis leg. It's really extraordinary. This idea of connection between our brain and our body and helping to improve coordination between those two. And that really does provide so much neuromuscular settling and nervous system downregulating, because our parts are talking better to each other. And I don't know about you, but when my parts, whether it's in myself or my family unit, are talking better to each other, everything feels better. Good. And then coming on up. Good. Great. And now from here, now stand and now notice where you're at in your body, right? How does this all feel now further up? I know this is a bit of a slower practice, and I'm a slower practitioner when it comes to teaching anyway, right? Ankle to knee. Now let's come here. But it's so interesting when we can really feel the results of what's actually going on in our movement. And I know, sometimes it's a lot more seductive just to blast through vinyasa practices and really other practices. I get it. So go do that. I like doing it too. And then come here when you want to get a little more aware, and then take that awareness and then take it off into wherever you practice, and then come back and have a reconnection, a rebooting, a resetting, a retraining, so that you continue to keep growing and keep expanding your capacity, no matter your age. Yeah? Because it doesn't matter how old you are. Okay, good. Now, notice where you're at. Okay, good. Let's take the legs wide. Guess where we're going? Rotating those legs out. Okay, come on down. And now notice what's going on. Now let me bring this guy out. I'll be talking about this a little bit more in the very near future, because I want to get a little bit more into breathing here. But notice what's going on with your breath and how your breath may have changed through the practice. Knowing that we want to have expansive breathing And our tissue limits or can foster the amount of air that comes into our system and how well our breathing is in our body and how well our body breathes. Just like that, yeah? So if you're grippy, right, if you're holding a lot of tension and that increases as you practice, chances are your breathing is going to be limited. Good. Okay, come back up. Okay, let's come back to the chair now. And let's bring one foot up onto the chair. And we're going to take a twist through the upper body. Good. And feel the bottom of that foot. Feel the connection or the linkage between your foot through your leg, up through your torso. And literally just use your awareness. Just be aware of where those parts are. Good. And then bring that back. Okay, another side. And I've got my SOAS online workshop coming up. And so much of this relates to that concept. The SOAS is a queen of compensation. She does so much for us and has such a interesting orientation between the T12 vertebrae down to your femur. And so one of the things that we can do as humans is push way too far. And one of the things that she can do is compensate for that pushing too far. And then at one point or another, she gets pooped out. Good. And then come on back. Okay, now come back to standing. Good. And now just feel. Good. And now notice and be aware. Okay, now here. This is where we're going to actually close this little session up. Here in this place. Now ask yourself, where do you want to go next? Do you want to go into a vinyasa practice? Do you want to go for a run? Do you want to lift weights? Do you just want to go for a cup of tea? Do you want to settle in, have a meditation, a pranayama, a yoga nidra? Now feel for where these parts of you are, the level of connection that you have, what makes sense next for you. And so from there, and from this standing position, you have a really great rest of your day. Take good care. And by the way, for those of you asking about Stu, he is doing great. Thank you for asking. His wasp bites have all healed and he is, well, I'm not sure, Stu, if they've actually healed, but he's on the mend. He's back to himself. Okay, so take care. We'll see you tomorrow morning, okay? Take good care.